but in general in Spanish, do you think machismo or macho has those kinds of connotation, like a little bit might be guy might be naughty, guy might be not very loyal to women or responsible or something like that.
Yeah, that's mostly negative connotations, I think. I think like
Really?
the
Oh,
term we came up in modern English now, toxic masculinity, is kind of
that's
the
not what we
equivalent,
came up with, but yeah.
but it's kind of been like it's been around much longer, I think, in Latin culture, like the concept.
But it is like a negative thing in
Yeah,
general.
but at least from my understanding, because I don't know if growing up here with other people, Latinos that grew up here, if we've been influenced by like American culture to where we view it as negative too.
Yeah, there's some things that I wonder if you could get connected to the old country, so to speak. Well, I guess the old country for you are still like is still new world. But anyway, I just mean like, yeah, to have more knowledge that isn't sort of corrupted, so to speak, by like
Yeah,
the people here. Yeah, I notice
yeah.
you thought when I used like the exclamation point or the question mark at the beginning of the sentence, also like they taught us to do in Spanish class, like that was something you didn't do because we don't do it in English in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say machismo kind of is to me more reasonable things that to be kind of critical about compared to like toxic masculinity, which has some silly things I feel that you shouldn't criticize men for. Um,
Mm. Yeah,
yeah,
well, toxic masculinity is one of those sort of academic kind of terms
yeah,
with the that culture behind it,
mm,
which has
yeah,
kind of become maybe a little bit, yeah, where it sees, to use another of their terms, or to use another term that they like to use, where they see any, I mean, masculinity in general as maybe
yeah,
problematic.
yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know that about machismo and macho. Yeah, I was saying to you off the air that I thought maybe a good English translation of that would be swarthy as opposed to manly or masculine. I think manly especially has those kind of it's masculine but without too many bad connotations. I mentioned that even the some of the founding documents of the United States, I think, or they mention like our manly honor or something like that.
Mhm.
But in Spanish, do they talk about a man who's maybe like manly or something like that, like masculine, but not but still, responsible, decent, and things like that in general. If they don't use the word
Uh,
machismo for that in your experience.
you don't use the word machismo for that in my experience. Like I've said, that has more negative connotations, so it's kind of used to describe men that are kind of the worst versions of
Yeah, yeah. What I'm asking
masculinity.
is if they have another term that's kind of like manly as opposed to swarthy.
I'm not so sure. Because of course there's always like caballero, but that's more like gentleman. Not more, but
Which literally means horse rider, right?
yeah.
Which I like that. It literally means like horsemen or something, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's like knight, I think. It means knight, I think in Spanish.
That'd
Um,
be the translation, right?
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's because of my limited knowledge of the language too, but we would just say stuff like, like true man or good man or traditional or something like things like that.
I see. Yeah, there's not necessarily a term, which, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, did you get that text of mine from the from Cicero?
Yeah, I did actually. Let me pull it up here.
I heard that on a recent Sam Harris podcast. He was talking with Murarescu. I can't remember the first name, but this guy's like his day job is lawyer, but he got a PhD in classics. He learned he's one of those smart people who learned like ancient Greek and even Sanskrit and Latin and things. I think Latin too. I think kind of you in classics you kind of always learn that. And then but then he became like an international lawyer so that he wasn't like a poor like scholar. But he's come back to it and yeah, they talked about the Eleusinian Mysteries and things. It's a good podcast. But yeah, I thought I might read that quote from Cicero. By the way, he has the same birthday as me, according to
Mm.
Wikipedia, which was funny to see that.
Nice.
I just
It's
looked
easy.
that up. For it appears to me that among the many exceptional and divine things your Athens has produced and contributed to human life, nothing is better than the Eleusinian Mysteries. For by means of them we have been transformed from a rough and savage way of life to the state of humanity, and have been civilized. Just as they are called initiations, so in actual fact we have learned from them the fundamentals of life and have grasped the basis not only for living with joy, but also for dying with a better hope. So yeah, I was moved by that.
Yeah,
That's why I sent it to you. I sent it to a
that's
few
high
people
praise.
actually. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, from among all the things like the basis of Western philosophy, science, the art and mathematics and everything, he's praising that. Yeah. What do you think of that?
But I want to know what those mysteries are in the first place.
Eleusinian mysteries.
Yeah.
Uh uh I don't know much. It seems like it was something that someone would do a little bit later in life, like in middle
Mm.
age, only once. It was like it had to do with a cult that was centered around the myth of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, I think, being abducted by the underworld god
Mhm.
Hades, or yeah, and yeah, so she was so it's like this myth of a human being at the earth splitting open and the earth and being abducted and taken
Mhm.
down into the underworld. So
Mhm.
seeing the the world of the dead while still living.
Mhm.
And it was a several day affair, like it took like 9 days, something like that. People walked from Athens, and I think there were various shrines or things and rituals along the way. And of course, a lot of walking and some dehydration and lack of food, kind of like a Sundance, I think, or various other rituals
Mhm.
in other cultures that have to do with deprivation of the body that will
Mhm.
help to produce like clarity and even visions and things.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it seemed to. So you walked from Athens, and it culminated after several days in Eleusis. And we don't know what happened, but what they talk about in the podcast was that he thinks it's likely that they took some sort of psychedelic, some kind of psychotropic drug that helped them to, have a life-changing kind of vision at the end of all this, just like they do in many other cultures for some kind of analogous uh, ritual. You grew up Catholic.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm a little envious of people who did like the kind of rituals and holiday kinds of things you guys have. I think more than Protestant people like you,
Yeah,
some
there's
more
just a
mystery.
yeah, it's just a lot of rituals and initiation growing up in that. I think it was like 7 sacraments a person can receive in their life.
Does the last one have to do with death?
Yeah, I think what's the last one called? Um, let me look.
Benediction?
Huh?
Benediction? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what it's called, but
but yeah, there's one that you receive when you're dying. I think that one also involves you having your final confession too.
mm, yeah, I guess that one's important to get off your chest before you
Hmm.
pass into the next world.
Yeah.
But the reason I asked about death was not to find out the name of it, but just because that's connected with the quote that I just read. And yeah, do you think any of the rituals that you know about help you to live with joy, help you to die with a better hope?
Yeah, I think they did. So it's like with the sacrament of the Eucharist, that one, I think there's like hints of death in that one too, because it's literally, we literally believe we're eating Jesus's body that he gives up
Yeah,
for us.
it is a sacrifice made
Yeah,
explicitly to help you to live forever. That's what John says.
yeah. So I felt that whenever I had it, it was like I was always reaffirming like faith and this closeness with God, which
Yeah.
is, a good thing to feel when you're kind of practicing a spirituality of sorts, whatever it could
Yeah, of
be.
course. Yeah, connection with something higher than you. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think I told you that J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Christian and
Mhm.
old style Catholic, and he lived a few years after 1965's Vatican II, but he still loudly gave the responses or whatever they're called in Mass in Latin rather than the sort of the vulgar, common language. But there was when I was reading about him, uh, there was a quote from a letter of his to one of his sons where he said, like, basically, he seemed to be consoling him or giving him advice for happiness in life, and he basically said, "There's nothing as sort of blessed and transformative as the Eucharist. If you and I thought, yeah, I mean, if you truly believe this is God's body, as dogma says, I mean, yeah. But I tend to emphasize faith over belief, and from Vervaeke, like maybe there's the degradation of religion in modern times maybe has to do partially with this overemphasis on belief in like what is real, what is not real, rather than sort of faith, which is more sort of yeah, which isn't so concrete or something. But yeah, but I think even if you don't place too much emphasis on the specific belief of transubstantiation and things, and maybe the explanations for how that somehow comes about. If you know that you're in some way reenacting the Last Supper, this time when Jesus was, having the last sort of communion with his disciples before his death, suffering terribly and death. That's a pretty moving thing. I can see how you can see this as like a reenactment of that with the representative of Jesus with God, the priest, and as
Mhm.
part of chanting or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the whole seven sacraments as a whole kind of are kind of a wheel of like life and death. So you're born, you get your baptism, then further down the line you have your first confession, then your Eucharist or communion, then eventually your
Yeah,
marriage, and then there's your final rite when you die. And
yeah.
then like once that happens, another soul is born to kind of in somewhere in the world to go through the whole cycle. Um, so I feel it's kind of maybe kind of natural too, in a
Mhm.
way. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think any kind of good religion or philosophy does
yeah,
have to have a strong element of naturalism. I mean,
yeah.
even if one is totally an atheistic materialist, one has to acknowledge that a human being is a natural being.
Mhm.
And I don't know, maybe two steps away from that is thinking how our mind should be going along with the cycles of the earth and our body and everything.
Mhm.
And yeah, I heard recently that I think it was Douglas Murray that said that uh, some of his secular friends are sending their kids to religious schools because they want, even though that they're not raised with religious beliefs and things, they want them to get some of that as a kid. And I do wonder with people who raise their kids completely secular, uh, how they get those moral lessons. I guess I'm talking about ethics, but also sort of, I don't know, a sense of that, greater presence and purpose and things that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's kind of a big gap to fill. Um, I know it's still a lot of work, even when you do have a religion to kind of pass on. But without it, I think it's kind of even have to be even more mindful or strategic about it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is people learn through stories.
Mm.
If you have a religion, you have like certain canonical stories that you would emphasize and maybe, hear and talk about over and over and over again over childhood. And then maybe you would learn them more deeply that way, and they would become a part of you. But if you don't have that religion, then it's just whatever stories appeal to you or maybe appeal to your parents or something like that. It doesn't connect you necessarily to a larger group of people that can maybe deepen your understanding and sort of training with those stories. And you might not get those stories, or yeah, the stories that might end up appealing to you might be from the mass culture or something. But that maybe connects you to the culture. But I think our culture tends to be kind of superficial. Um,
Yes, there's that. And I don't think maybe there's just organizations and groups that kind of focus on the growth of kids. Like I can only think of like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. Uh,
yeah, which I think are good
yeah,
organizations. Those
yeah.
those train your mind and body and connect you to nature and others. And yeah, they have ethics too. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Would Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts be enough? I don't know, but most people don't. Most
Mm.
kids aren't raised with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts anyway.
Yeah, so it's not something that everyone will even have access to or financial means kind of
Yeah,
put their kids through.
yeah, yeah. So then there's school, but you know, there used to be civics education, more, which sort of taught you, I don't know, the American religion or something. Uh, I'm kind of joking, um, but yeah, like values and traditions, institutions, history, certain stories that way too, where you get some ethics and a moral sense of purpose is maybe it tries to be is trying to be taught through civics, but we don't really have that much anymore. Yeah. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, I
that's
think we are. I think our society is ripe for, new religions or renewal of religions. Do you see this happening with in society or in religions? I think I've told you about the Ross Douthat book that I've been reading, called Bad Religion, how we became a nation of heretics, and how the sort of liberalization of many Christian denominations has just led to their sort of, which was argued for to increase dwindling church numbers, but actually has seemed to accelerate those that downturn in church numbers. And yeah, do you see anything in our culture that is hopeful for spirituality,
mm,
including organized sort of spirituality?
I'm not sure if it's like I'm not sure whether it's good or bad, but I've just read about and kind of noticed just like a big increase in like paganism or interest in paganism. Um, so yeah, I don't know how fast that's growing, but I've read about it and I've even seen there was this controversy with like some makeup store releasing like some sort of witchcraft kit with like sage, things like that. And I'm assuming if a company did that, it's because interest in that kind of stuff is increasing. So I've only read about it, but even like in casual conversation I've had with the people, like I've had there be talk about like them doing like the interest in that kind of stuff. So like doing like witchcraft or rituals and things like that, which
Can
I'm
you
kind
tell
of
me more?
surprised about. Yeah.
Can you tell me more?
Um, so yeah, I spoke with this one person that said that they started doing witchcraft when they were a kid, and they said they did it because someone like made them angry and they kind of wanted to get back at that person. So they did some sort of ritual and they thought it actually worked because that person hadn't had a good luck since. Um, but yeah, I don't know that's necessarily a good thing to do. But I guess since that whole thing, they've still kind of been doing witchcraft. Um, so yeah, it's
Yeah,
like I
I
don't.
don't think that's the type of thing that is leading to like
Yeah,
self
that's why I'm not sure it's
transformation.
necessarily a good religious movement for like I guess a portion of people. They're kind of using it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like
Uh,
naturalistic religions. I think
yeah,
they're good, but not like necessary, but not sufficient. I think
yeah,
we still need something that's as the Cicero quote says, helps to civilize us, not simply bring a sense of spirituality and sort of those primitive instincts, which
yeah,
I think for psychological health you need to deal with, but you should not start letting those things take over. I
yeah,
mean, there's plenty of people who are very much in touch with their sort of primitive instincts and are pretty bad behaving people.
yeah, yeah. But then I'm also reminded, also thinking about you mentioning at one point like these LSD rituals that are now like being used in as part of therapy
Yeah,
in some
yeah.
places.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as like a hopeful sign, and maybe the
Yeah.
legalization of psychedelics with with limitations, like with spirit or therapy guide, or and legitimate people too. Yeah. Yeah, I think I for me the psychedelic kind of the positive psychedelic talk is one of the few things that I can think of that is like a sort of good movement on the spiritual front. But I yeah, I think we need more than that. Like I don't really, well, I don't know. Um yeah. Yeah, I think we need something like that Mysteries of Eleusis, and yeah, and the mythologies that that really help us. The fact that we have these yeah, I mentioned the Mysteries of Eleusis had as seem to have as its basis or something the myth of Persephone's abduction, and yeah, we need and maybe the Eucharist is a reenactment of the Last Supper. Um, but yeah, I do think the sort of the stories that we tell and that we sort of digest and sort of reenact in some way, and you know, or are involved in rituals in some way, can kind of help, you know,
Mm.
spiritual transformation, psychological healing, health. Yeah. Yeah, I think for a long time, I think Harold Bloom and probably others have pointed out we don't have shared myths. We don't have
Mm.
sort of things that really move us that we sort of, you know, can connect to ourselves on a deeper level and with
Mm.
others too. And that's a problem for a culture, for psychological health. And I think
Yeah,
that's
just
part of the reason that people are overly attached to politics, is because it gives them that sense of group group connection and sense of purpose to something larger than themselves and above themselves and into the future, you know. But I don't think politics is a substitute for spiritual life. Yeah, psychedelic seems like a one promising thing. Can you think of anything else?
uh I guess philosophy. So I've noticed online that it seems a lot of young men are like in particular are like now interested in stoicism. So I've kind of seen that popping up in like social media or kind of just anywhere I go online.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's I thought of that too. Yeah, stoicism. Yeah. The stoicism seems very good for dealing with the stresses of life. And yeah, very good. I like stoicism a lot. What about connecting to something larger than yourself? I'm not so much sure about that, or a sense of purpose and things. To me, it seems like a way to self mastery more.
Yeah,
But
me
I still
neither.
think you
Like
need.
it's like the only thing I kind of see for that is just life coaches becoming more popular, but I don't really think they're contributing anything meaningful for most people.
Well, I mean, mastery of life is important, and I think you can, you know, feel much more focused probably on spirituality
Mm.
if you have the more you have life mastery. But yeah, I don't think it's everything. I don't think something like the quote that I gave could be said about life coach seminars or books or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. Well, maybe to be continued as we find more out or have more experiences and things. You haven't done
Yeah.
psychedelics before?
No, I have never done it, and I'm kind of afraid to, actually.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean they are very powerful. You're afraid certain demons might come up or something.
yeah, it's like yeah, like I hear frequently that if there's something big you haven't really worked through or something that it's not recommended. And I'm afraid that might be the case for me and that I wouldn't have a good experience.
Have you not
Uh,
done that journaling exercise, that expressive
no,
journaling, I think it was called?
no, I haven't. I was thinking about it earlier this week.
Should do
No,
it.
actually, when you sent me that post from Jordan Peterson on Quora about things you should
Uh,
do to have a good life, and part of it was like writing down whatever was bothering you. And I
yeah,
thought of that assignment you had told me about that I hadn't yet done.
yeah, yeah. I think that that would be good. Yeah. But yeah, with psychedelics in general, set and setting, it's like to be clear on the purpose, to have the right people in the right room and everything, and probably the right time of your life and everything is good. But yeah, I mean, some people talk about psychedelics as like done right, it can be something that's like does what 10 years of therapy might do,
Mm,
or like years of meditation or something. So I think
mhm,
it's something very important for our culture. And I should do it again. I am afraid to do them a little bit. I don't really feel that fear now, but I have had bad trips before.
mm,
Yeah, the one time I've done psychedelics was mushrooms, and it was a bad trip. Although also there was something good that happened where this guy that I knew only a little bit, who was part of the group that I was in, we like ended up holding each other and kind of comforting
mm,
each other. But it wasn't in. It was like in a closeness kind of way. It was nice. It
mm,
wasn't. It didn't feel like coddling or something like that.
mm,
But yeah, that was really nice. But for me, yeah, it was a hard thing, but it was
mm,
interesting too. It was weird. Everybody in my life seemed to become equal in my mind in some way. And it was interesting that looking back, I think I've told you that we were in the woods, and there was a road nearby, and it was at night, and I saw someone drive by in the in a truck, and I looked in the cab, and I just marveled at the fact that someone could do something as simple as just driving forward on a road, with all the things that I now realized are going through your mind at every single moment. So it was interesting looking back, though, thinking that I seemed to assume that when I was in that state, that I was simply more aware of what was going on in my own mind more than more stuff was going on in my mind. I
mm,
seem to believe that. And I don't know how true that is, but I think that's kind of true. I think maybe, when we're awake, our waking mind is much more sort of bland and superficial, maybe to get along with the sensory data, and to be operating on all the sort of cognitions we have about the world in order to interact with it, social structures and imaginary things at work. I don't mean
mm,
imaginary like other people don't believe them also, but just, society operates on the basis of sort of shared beliefs or whatever, even like with money and things.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it does seem like mental health is greater and greater mental health has to do with the more sort of integrated you are, top and bottom, deep, deep in your unconscious and with your conscious mind. And yeah, I think yeah, meditation obviously is good, but psychedelics hold a lot of promise.
If you had the opportunity soon for psychedelics with a qualified person and setting, like would you feel ready or not yet?
Yeah, I would probably actually feel ready. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I do have the sort of confidence and the right mindset or whatever to kind of with the right person and everything and to kind of yeah face these demons rather than yeah sort of let them take over and cause chaos more than I can handle. But yeah, where do you think it what do you think it would take for you to get to that point?
Mm, I'm not sure because I figured if maybe I was in a similar situation and had that opportunity, I would just do it even if I'm not sure. So,
Okay. Okay.
and I'll
So
just
you
find
may feel
out and
mm,
if it's good, if it was good or not.
okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
you may feel scared, but when you said that, you didn't mean you don't also have courage. Maybe you
Yeah.
also feel like that courage to dive in if
Yeah. So,
it's a reasonable situation.
yeah. So I would still take my chances. And maybe even seeing bad stuff during the trip is helpful in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, maybe who knows in the future. Uh in California, it might even be legal soon in some way.
Mm.
But there's also other countries that one can do it in, and also other ways. Yeah. Well, anything to keep in mind for this week?
No, that exercise he told me about. So
Yeah.
it's still kind of lingering there on my pile of things to do, and it's kind of at the top of things to do.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe yeah. Next week you'll tell me you did it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Until then.
Mm.
Okay. Well, good talking to you.
Bye.